Gen Alpha is coming, and they're going to make Gen Z look old. We wanted to do an episode all about Gen Alpha last season, and we couldn't because all of the generation wasn't even born yet. Gen Alpha is born between 2010 and 2024. Okay, they're fully digital. We talk about Gen Z as being the digital generation, right? But Gen Alpha is fully digital from day one. They're already influencing household income right now. $28 billion in the US alone is controlled by Generation Alpha right now. Okay, so before you write off these kids, they control a huge amount of income. So you have to be looking at your products and services and seeing, are these things that parents are going to be consulting families with, or are these a household decision? Because Gen Alpha has influential power in the household, and they're controlling $28 billion worth just in the US. So brands are going to start to face this generational shift. So some of you brands that have been really good with Gen Z are going to have to start to figure out how to make this shift over to Gen Alpha. You have been good with Gen Z, have not had anything to worry about, and these older brands have had to figure out how to shift from X to millennial or from millennial to Z, and now you are going to have to do the same thing from Z to Alpha. And so jumping in now and starting to figure out those things is really important because they're already controlling a lot of household spending. And it's pretty easy to get by because there's a lot of overlap between Z and Alpha. But as we start to move forward, you're going to see the divide and see the difference. And we have to be really intentional if we want to make sure we get Generation Alpha. So the case study I want to look at today is a little bit different just because our oldest Gen Alpha was born in 2010, right? So they're, 15? So we're going to take a look at Lego. So they have done a really good job shifting. They've always had to do that, right? Lego's been around for a long time, but they have had to shift generation to generation to generation to stay relevant with each of these generations, even though they're always attracting the same age range. So they wanted to build a deeper connection with these digital kids, right? Lego is not a digital brand, but they needed to reach this digital age. So what they did is they wanted to build a digital play for kids that was safe for these kids who are spending hours online. So what they did is they partnered with Epic, the company, to build Lego Fortnite, where they expanded with physical sets that tied to actual in-game playing. So what they're able to do is take a place where Gen Alpha already was and connect their brand to where they already were. Okay, so there's a few different takeaways, and we'll transition into the actual main points in a second here. But the biggest thing I want to take away is that they went where Gen Alpha already was. This is something we talk about with Gen Z and millennials as well. But especially as you're starting to transition to Gen Alpha, don't try to fake it. It looks like you're trying too hard, right? I use this example all the time of when on The Office, Ryan tried to create this like online paper social media platform and tried to get everyone there, and it went horribly wrong, right?
You're chatting with your friends. You're talking about the latest music, about the election. All of it is happening in our virtual paper store.
And then an older gentleman asked you boxers or briefs.
The social networking feature of the Dunder Mifflin Infinity website was infiltrated by sexual predators.
Instead, what we need to do, we don't want to create some weird webkins for Legos, right? Because there's so many issues that can go wrong, and ultimately you're going to look like you're trying too hard, and there's so many opportunities to lose. But instead, what Lego did is they went where 90 million Gen Alpha kids already were, and they set up their brand and aligned it with where they already were and what they already liked to do, and built that connection there. And so they didn't have to try to find the audience. They went where the audience already was. And so that's the biggest takeaway I want to look at here, and I'm going to keep tying into that as we tie into this main content here. So what can we steal from Lego's Playbook, from all these other brands that are doing really great things with Gen Alpha? Build some kind of playable IP. So it doesn't have to be an online thing. There are lots of brands that are trying with Roblox or partnering with other actual gaming brands to do this. And if you have the knowledge and the know-how and the brand that actually works to be able to do this, go ahead and do that. But creating some way to gamify what you're doing in a way that connects with Gen Alpha and makes sense, that is a great way to go about that. We have talked about that in season 1. We talked about gamification. We talked about how that works great with Gen Alpha. We talked about how that works great with Gen Z. But ways to create steps. The early stage of gamification is punch cards, right? Think about when Gen Z, millennials, even Xers were kids, everyone had a punch card, right? You get an ice cream, you get a punch card. You go to the laundromat, you get a punch card. And when you get 10 of them, you get a free sandwich, right? That is early stage gamification. If you can figure out where Gen Alpha is going and somehow create a gamification system to do that, something they can play, a playable IP for your brand, that's a huge first step for them. Tip number 2 is market to the household, not to the kid. Okay? So, yes, Gen Alpha is controlling a lot of household income, right? We talked about how much $28 billion in the U.S. alone they're controlling in household income. But that is not their bank account. They're 15 years old. $28 billion is not in all of those kids' accounts. The youngest Gen Alpha kid is, 9 months old? So they don't have bank accounts. They're not controlling income in that way. So you're marketing to a household in many cases. So in some things, yes, you can market directly to the kid. The kid's already online. They're playing this game or they're interacting with this thing, and you can market directly to them. But most of the time, you're marketing to the household. How can you connect to the parent or the guardian or the household as a whole and to the kid? And so we're want to be marketing to the household as a whole, creating a parent mode UX, wish lists, spending limits, value propositions, learning, durability, those type of things. So yes, you want it to be super, super fun. And then down in the description, it's the durability. It's the how you can learn from this because the parents are going to love this. And you got to remember, the parents of Gen Alpha kids are millennials and Gen Z. So these other things we've talked about with Gen Z and millennials are also applying. So you want to be thinking about that. If you're selling a toy to a 9-year-old, you need to be marketing, yes, directly to that 9-year-old who's going to think that this Bluey toy is so cool, but also how can they learn from it and it can last forever, and marketing to their Gen Z and millennial parent, and be thinking about all of those elements as well, because there's a lot of pieces going on there. And again, you have to be thinking about, yes, Gen Alpha is controlling that income to a certain level, but it is a household income. So market to the household, not just the kid. Okay? Gen Alpha's influence is already there and it's reshaping the spend, but bring the parents into the story early. All right? Tip number 3 is ship privacy by design. Okay, so we're marketing to Gen Alpha, but they're 15 or less. Okay, there's a lots of privacy requirements, regardless of what's going on in the U.S. right now, with certain AI restrictions and certain privacy restrictions being lifted in general. What we want to be really careful of is these are kids, so. The ethical thing to do, regardless of laws, is we want to make sure we're keeping privacy in mind. We also want to keep in mind, again, these are millennial and Gen Z parents. Privacy matters a lot more to them. So be thinking about how do we market privacy as part of what we're doing. So if it's a digital product, how do we use privacy to our advantage? How do we use anonymity as part of our product? How do we keep safety as part of our product? All right, so remember, build a playable IP or gamification of some kind, market to the household, not just the kid, ship privacy by design. And in a second, we're going to take a look at some more questions you had about Gen Alpha. All right, the first question you guys sent in is, where does Gen Alpha spend time? Yeah, it's pretty similar to Gen Z. I mean, we'll continue to track this as things change, but we're looking at YouTube, Roblox, Minecraft. I mean, a lot of those things are similar. TikTok is still similar. What's hard is with Gen Alpha, they're still young, right? So they're 15 or less. So there's only so much tracking we can actually do. So we know for sure they're on YouTube, and we know that they spend a lot of time there. We know for sure they're on Roblox. We know certain online games they play, like Minecraft. But there's a lot of things we don't know yet. I would say if we're trying to reach them right now at a targeted age, YouTube is the way to go now. Another question we had in here is TikTok a must? It's nice to have. Again, it's a household situation, right? So a lot of kids, you're talking about a difficult range, right? If you're talking about a 13 to 15-year-old, those kids are probably have their own devices and are watching on their own accounts. And so, yeah, they might have their own TikTok, YouTube account that we can market to. If we're talking younger, it's kind of up in the air on whether they're watching on their own or on their parents' account. It also depends on the age of the parent, on parents' preferences, on whether they're watching on their own account or something more closely monitored by the parents. So it's hard to know how to directly reach that age. And there's also an ethical thing that comes into mind of how do we reach kids ethically, right? We don't want to be shoving so much content down their throats that that it becomes harmful, right? So I think the biggest thing and the ultimate thing we're asking is, how do we reach this age range, right? Like, how do we reach all of these kids? And I would say it goes back to the first thing that I said about Lego is go where they already are.
Welcome to Ryan's World. Welcome to Super.
Right? So if you're trying to reach really young kids, right? You're trying to reach 5-year-olds. So partner with whatever those 5-year-olds in your niche are watching or are consuming online already, right? So sell a product through their favorite kids performer. Sell something, partner with Miss Rachel, partner with, whoever is online and they're consuming. Partner with Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft or produce on YouTube. But it's not as perfect of a system as if I say, hey, I want to reach 35-year-olds, and I can guarantee you that I'm hitting 35-year-olds on Instagram and TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. It's not going to be the same because they're younger. and there's certain ethical concerns, and there's also certain things of, do we even know that they have an account or that they're sharing an account? All right, the next question we have is your son Gen Alpha? Yes. So this is a fun one for me. I have a son. He was actually born in November of last year, so he is just past the cutoff. I'm going to show a cute video of him because I can. He is Gen Alpha. He is the very tail end. And his cousin, who was born in March, was actually will be the first year of Gen Beta, which wait 10 years, and we'll be doing a video on them as well. And something to think about that's kind of interesting here is, so my wife is actually the last year of millennials, and I am one of the first years of Gen Z. So that's why when we talk about generations like this, we talk about them kind of together because there's a lot of overlap, right? If we're selling a product to our household, right, there are 3 generations to keep in mind. And if we ever have more kids, there's going to be 4 generations to keep in mind, right? And if you're selling just to the adults, there's 2 different generations, but a lot of our buying habits are going to be similar. Some things will be different, but a lot of them are going to be similar. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind when you're talking about millennials versus Gen Z. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of things different, but there's a lot of overlap there. And when you talk about Roman, my son, and you talk about his cousin, there's going to be a lot of things similar between them. They're only 4 or 5 months apart, but they're technically 2 completely different generations. But the reality is I mean, we'll see. But I would imagine a lot of the marketing trends that we see then are going to be pretty similar. What visuals perform? Yeah, so you got to remember these kids have been consuming a lot of content for a long time. So we want we want simple shapes, high contrast, readable text. Things need to be really simple. I mean, this is not a Gen Alpha thing. This is just a kids thing, right? We need simple. We need it to be understandable. We need it to be skimmable. We always talk about like things should be at a 3rd grade reading level for adults. It needs to be really, really simple for kids who are below that reading level, right? We want to be playful, clear, honest. Don't lecture. And again, I think the ultimate best way to do this, and I'm going to just probably end these questions, like I think all of these questions ultimately are going to come down to find partners or find where your Gen Alpha audience already is and partner with them. That is the best way, especially if you're not already marketing to Gen Alpha. The best way to start is to find partners who are working with your audience and build helpful, co-beneficial relationships and pour into that audience, and you're going to build a trust there that's going to be longer lasting. And there's a lot more that we can do once they start to get older. And as we move into the next few years and we start to want to reach those, as those 15-year-olds turn 16, 17, 18, and they start to move on to high school and college, and we can start to actually target them better, and we start to get more data on them, then we can actually do something about it. Right now, it's still really difficult to hyper target our audience and what we're looking for. But I think ultimately what we want to be doing is partnering when we can. And that's the easiest way and the cheapest way to be doing that. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you follow us right here. And next week, we are talking about TikTok and sales funnels in TikTok. So make sure you send in your questions either at this email or feel free to put it right in the comments below. And this has been New Gen Marketing.